Overreaction Theater, Act 2. Marquez Callaway, Travis Etienne, Jamar Chase. We're knee-deep in the preseason. We don't know how many data points we'll have next week, but here we are. That and more this week on the Footballguys Dynasty Show. And Jordan, Travis Etienne, big Dynasty name and out for the year. We had a couple running backs of note a year ago. We've got Cam Akers this year, already known. Travis Etienne is the latest. It will not be done. That is the carnage of the position. And here we are with a redshirt rookie season out of the round 1 pick for the Jaguars.
Yeah, disappointing, man. I was hoping for a good season out of him, and he was definitely an arbitrage on Najee Harris as well. So to see him, this happen in the preseason in a meaningless game is frustrating from a lot of perspectives. But it's going to open up a window for James Robinson, and I actually acquired him as like an ancillary piece in a deal, and I was like, oh, look, an injury away running back, perfect. And sometimes they hit. And I was fortunate enough to trade away Etienne in a different deal a couple weeks ago, just totally obviously unrelated to this. But I mean, I think the market for James Robinson is going to be interesting. I think Etienne's going to have a potential secondary buy market maybe sometime in season. If it's not right now, it'll be interesting if he's on contenders, that sort of thing, because he could be in a range of going in rookie drafts where he's actually in contenders, on a contender roster.
Especially Superflex, yeah. I think it's interesting. James Robinson, I just thought of it while you were talking because it's 2 years in a row where he was behind round 1 Leonard Fournette. That ends up dispersing. And then now he's behind, or at least challenged now and in the future will be surpassed by Travis Etienne, another round 1 option. And he rolls 7s both seasons. Now, who knows? Maybe he forced Fournette out of there. Obviously, he wasn't the one that stepped on Etienne's foot this year. So, but the point is, for those that held through and it's like, oh, I rolled snake eyes. This is not good. I could have sold for a first. Now you might get large parts of 2 seasons in a row from a guy you got off the waiver wire, a guy you got for cheap. You mentioned he had fallen from the point of being worth a first to later second, maybe a third and a player at points of this offseason after the NFL draft. And he was a high-risk player. He didn't emerge after the draft. But, what a story for him where we know he can play. I think it brings Carlos Hyde, who had been maybe a dynasty cut previous weeks or since the rookie draft time. Now he's back in the fold, one of those veteran injury away guys. So moving pieces here, and we still really don't have a good sense of, is this team going to be good? Is this going to be a good team that actually has a lot of fantasy production to go around? Or is it a lot of wide receivers, a lot of pieces, but no high impact guys at the skill positions? That's a possible outcome here, just of the macro. The tide is not overly high on this swimming pool. So that would be one point. I wonder if you kind of mentioned, if you can't get a deal done for Etienne, he's the perfect thing to blend contending teams and rebuilding teams, right? In season of, you might use that as a chip. And then also, that's going to be the exact kind of guy you target, whether you didn't get a deal done for maybe Cam Akers or Etienne. Those are pieces. If you're 1-5 partway through the season and you're closing up shop, that's the exact type of player to go after. And it makes it a win-win going into the offseason.
Yeah, for sure. And, it's always interesting because people will bail on assets, and maybe this isn't the the moment to have this conversation, but I've got Elliott in a spot where I'm probably not going to contend, like just the way the team build has gone. I'm probably not going to contend this year. And the question is like, do you do it now where he's probably not at an elite price, or do you wait and pivot in season, right? When more injuries come. And actually at that point, assuming that you can get through, right, and you've got the injury risk of your guy, of holding your guy as well, but assuming you can get through, some of the other attrition at the position is going to make some of these existing veterans like Ezekiel Elliott and some others more expensive, because the demand's going to go up because we're going to get more injuries. And that's a time where you couldn't have maybe gotten an Etienne for a big plus on top of him for Elliott. You might be able to do that with a good couple weeks in season. So I think it's an interesting pivot. And honestly, as you sort of see these rosters move, what will happen is, hey, teams that I didn't think necessarily are are contending, like, hey, I'm actually sitting decently well right now, considering all the other attrition that's going on around me. So I am really open to, at this point, being, if you can get what you perceive to be a deal for Etienne, I think that's interesting, but now might not be the moment for it either.
Yeah, you mentioned your Ezekiel Elliott scenario. The good news right now is technically everyone's a contender, or 11 of the 12 teams. I mean, they really don't have an idea of like going into it. Oh, no matter what, I'm actually going to eschew contending. Like, I'm going to do everything I can not to win games this year. That's a rare scenario. So the good news is you have the entire league that would be to some level interested in a contending type player. Now, the negative of waiting until October, November is, as a seller, is if you are getting a first, at that point it's a contending first, because you have that data point. The good news, if you sold now, there are picks that, hey, their season doesn't go right, they end up not contending, and that pick could turn into very early. So you do have that potential, and you have a bigger audience. But like you said, you may get a bigger return and a better return in season because a dead red contender wants to add a luxurious piece. And then, I'll give you Etienne, I'll give you my first, I'll do this, I'll do that. Now it will be, later in the round because they're adding Zeke and they already kind of know their data points so far. So there's pluses and minuses to both.
Yeah, there is for sure.
Yeah, let's talk about Marquez Callaway. Ramondre Stevenson, we discussed him previously. Marquez Callaway, it's the Monday night performance heard around the world. I mean,
it's like the Amir Abdullah thing, right? Like, this is
Amir
Abdullah run.
I mean, 2 great throws I was actually more impressed with the throws than I was the catches. Dropping it in the bucket there, but 2 touchdowns. Jameis Winston hopefully solidifying his starting role to at least begin the season of what we hope is a nice rebound, because this is his best chance ever with Sean Payton. But Marquez Callaway, again, James Robinson, talk about a perfect storm of Michael Thomas out for a while. Tre'Quan Smith has never quite put it together. This passing game, this wide receiver 1 role is wide open. We're talking like a 10-lane across highway. We're talking like San Francisco running game lanes in terms of the availability of targets and taking the number 1 role. I would ask, is Callaway going to take full advantage? What does that mean? And big picture, if you're not really using him now, if you're good at wide receiver, is he going to be one that you look back in week 8, January, and you're like, I had a chance to trade that guy and I said no, and that was the upside I got? Like, those are some questions I have about Marquez Callaway. What are some of your thoughts, as he's probably not in waiver wires anymore, and he was cheap whenever you got him, even if it was last week, he was cheap.
Yeah, he was. It's interesting. Like, you're basically going into this with an undrafted free agent. What's the prior on that? Even in a good situation, we
teaser low. The odds are like middle single digits the last 25 years for peers I was trying to find. Yeah. It's
not great. So I mean, for me, I would explore the sell window. I don't think a first is open yet, but I think a super flex second, like, the odds on that are a whole heck of a lot better than Marquez Callaway tipping your dynasty roster this year. I think the big news is Winston, and honestly, I think even more interesting is the Troutman thing. Like, you could have pitched me on the idea, and I wrote this week on something that's actually made this. It's up on Footballguys right now, but just talking about the tight end position and how, like, if you look at Troutman, like, he's in his range of outcomes is leading them in receiving, right? Like, probably not with a healthy Kamara, but with a non-healthy Kamara, he would have been. Now he's hurt. I threw the jinx down, but that's the type of conversation we're having here without Michael Thomas, right?
I couldn't write. I wrote 2 or 3 articles on tight ends at Footballguys. I couldn't not include Troutman. Like, every time it was either late round stuff or potential league winners or late tight ends, like all of this stuff. It just checks every box for Troutman.
Yeah, and a quarterback that can ring it up. You know what I mean? Like,
wasn't it Winston that fueled a big year out of Cameron Brate?
Yeah,
of all guys, right? I mean, who was, again, minimal pedigree, but turned into the guy down the seam in the red zone.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I like that whole scenario, and this could be a situation. Remember the huge Cam Newton year? He had like that huge year, and he basically supported no starter like at the receiving position. But I think he finished his quarterback one, if memory served, that year.
Ted Ginn had a
It was
few
Ted
long
Ginn.
touchdowns.
Yeah. It was like Philly Brown. Like it was
hodgepodge of everybody. Yeah, and then I think he had Greg Olson at the time.
Right. This is one of those situations where you could see like, Winston throws
30
for like
touchdowns for Winston, but
right,
no
4,800 yards and no one
no
cracks
top
like
12 tight
700.
end,
Right.
no top 30 wide receiver. I mean,
Right.
that's what I would ask you is at this point, what would be a good outcome for, let's just say it's the pre-Michael Thomas era, whatever span of time that is. Is that the whole year? Is that half a year? X number of games? What would be a success knowing what we know about the Marquez Callaway profile, but also knowing he's one of the greatest wide receivers ever when we judge it just based on the past 7 days?
The benefit of recency bias.
He's way better than the guys that aren't playing. I mean, those guys are on the roster bubble if you haven't played in the preseason.
Yeah. He's with the benefit of recency bias. He's outstanding. What's the best case scenario? I mean, theoretically, wide receiver one. No, I mean, I think maybe a wide receiver 2 type role. Like Winston can bring that out of somebody. I don't think that's a particularly high likelihood, but I mean, Winston has the ability to ring it up. So I wouldn't rule that out. I mean, again, even if he gets to that, my question would be like, how much is that really moving the needle for you? And how many of those games are you going to feel like you're going to start him week 1 and then, if he's mediocre, you're going to start him week 2, and then just keep doing this. And
assuming your wide receiver depth charts around dynasty water coolers, right? I mean, we are talking about. I mean, are you benching? Let's just go into week 1. Brandon Ayuk. Let's say your wide receiver 3-4 decision is like Brandon Ayuk versus Marquez Callaway. You doing that?
No.
You doing that in week 1, 2, 3? I mean. And then we always say, it's not sunken cost, but it's basically like you're trying to encapsulate previous points, where it's like if Callaway he's on your bench and this is chasing, right? It's chasing start rate. It's like, so let's say he has a low start rate week 1, and if you track this stuff, it's funny to see how it goes, because then let's say he goes for 5 for 88 and a touchdown. His start rate zooms up, and in week 2, guess what? He probably underperforms that stat line. And part of that is touchdown rate and all that kind of stuff. So, and then he disappoints and then he sags back down. Like you end up chasing your tail the entire season and then you look back. What I love is on my fantasy league, for example, you can actually look and see, well, who on your team you actually started and how many times. And it says what your points per game were in those games. And when you look back and you're like, when you see a guy that, Marquez Callaway, look at him. He's wide receiver 22 on the season, halfway through. And you're like, wow. But you started him twice.
He's a negative AWARP guy.
He's averaging like 8 points per game in the 2 games you started him. Well, probably the time you had the hubris and the confidence to start him was after the big game.
Right.
This is the 2 in a row.
Yeah. It's the Kiki Kuti effect. Like a couple years ago, he had like 3 big games, and it was all like on 5% start rate, and then it ticked up to like 65%, dropped to 45%, dropped to 30, back down to 5, and boom, that's the week he goes off.
People complain about Will Fuller, but you get the 40-point game because you back him all the time. So that's when you ensure that you get them. That's like the whole stock market. Oh, the stock market's way up, let me buy. No, that means your returns aren't going to be that great. You have to have the stones to, like, right after a guy gets 2 targets, and it's like, oh wow, like when does Keenan Allen go 2 for 20? Well, he's probably going to be the squeaky wheel, and he's probably going to get absolutely peppered the next week. That's not going to happen again. So that's when you have to double down in your confidence of strong profiles and strong involvement in offenses. All right. Do want to remind you, you're listening to the Football Guys Dynasty Show, and you want to get that daily email update. And that is at join.footballguys.com/Dynasty Show. And you want to get all the news. It seems like the last 24, 48 hours, all we've been getting is news, and it's been dynasty relevant. You mentioned Adam Troutman. We didn't even know how Nick Vannett is doing as the number 2. Are we going to have to go towards that? The waiver was this week. Juwan Johnson, let's get refreshed with his profile. You mentioned Travis Etienne. We've got Jamar Chase. So many moving pieces. the Dynasty news in the Football Guys email from Joe Bryant is what you need on a daily basis. So go over there to footballguys.com and sign up. So tying up loose ends, Jordan. I mean, this Saints offense is one that, talk about the moving pieces. Tre'Quan Smith has never put it together. Tony Jones in the backfield. But Jameis Winston is really the linchpin to this whole thing coming together and being a strong pool to sip your cup from for fantasy production. Is there a play here? Like, do you think, is it Callaway selling now for a second? Is it Latavius Murray's stock is so far beaten down you can get him for a fourth, or you know what, he might be dropped before week 1 and that's the play to pick him up for free? What's the angle that you think has, other than Winston, who we've covered a little bit, is there an angle that has the biggest bang for the buck at this point in time?
Let me get my props on Alvin Kamara, running back 1. I mean, that could be a takeaway. I think the things you said about Callaway, I think that's right. Obviously the Winston stuff. I mean, what would be interesting to me is, like, I want to know early on if he's going to be a franchise quarterback. And what's interesting is, like, we might not get that opportunity because he's going to be throwing to not very many known people, right? And that's going to be problematic. I think if he absolutely raises that floor and performs well, like, then we might know. But he's rowing upstream in that effort. I do think the backup running back situation is interesting, and there was some hijinks, I don't know if that's the word, about the announcement that Tony Jones was basically the running back 2, and that got deleted and some other stuff. I don't know entirely there, but I think Tony Jones is probably worth a spec ad in your dynasty leagues, and hopefully ultimately
you want this running back 2.
Yes.
The short answer is you want the running back 2 here.
Right.
Now, the interesting thing is, if the answer ended up being Tony Jones and you have 2 former NFL starters that have been high impact fantasy options in Latavius Murray and Devonta Freeman, and Jones is the answer there because he's, again, younger, and I guess at this version they view him at this age viewed as better. But Jones is closer to just a guy. I would just remind folks to not get too over your skis, because making a lot of dynasty waiver bets on running backs is better than just like anointing and going, oh, I'm going to go 25% on Tony Jones. Like, it's August. Be careful. Because if you're not in deep leagues, I get it. If it's a 40-man roster and Tony Jones, you're like, this is probably the best running back crack I'm going to get all year. That's okay if that's your thought process and calculus. But in a typical mid-20s, something like that, you're going to get a lot of cracks at running back. So spending big now, I don't really know that there's a big point. I like doing the 1%, 5%. Like, I like doing a lot of those bets, especially 1 to 3%. And just doing that over and over again and seeing how many times you catch lightning in a bottle and you actually have the running back 2. And if it's Tony Jones by week 1, so be it. But please don't drop Latavius Murray. That would be my one big point. Devonta Freeman, I guess maybe you can say he's probably the third option of the ones mentioned in terms of what's most likely to happen. Him being running back 2 is probably the least likely of those 3 guys. So if you got to cut him, I kind of understand. But if they move Murray or something, I mean, he's probably gonna be relevant where he goes too. So just be careful. Be careful moving away from that pretty nice profile.
Could you imagine if he lands with the Rams?
Well, exactly. I mean, where does he fit? A strong 1B with 1A potential there. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, so we've got jumbling. I mean, we've had a smattering of NFL cuts so far. The meaningful part is yet to come. And that last period, that last rotation on the Ferris wheel before we get to the week 1 prep is going to be the one where there's going to be, I mean, we think Kadri Allison is safe-ish, but yeah, he's the number 2 for now. For now, based on options available to Atlanta in-house. That's where we sit. He may not, and that's why you can't go in there and say, oh yeah, Allison's my guy. No, you can spend a buck on him. That's fine. But don't just, if you miss out on him, so be it, because he may go right back to the waiver wire. By someone else. Be very, very careful. Jamar Chase, is he another one that we might see an early season discount? The Football Guys, was he one that you covered? You did a great series looking at the Football Guys projections for this year versus dynasty cost and kind of market valuation. I kept seeing Jamar Chase in rankings projections in the top 25 or so of the wide receiver positions. That always caught my eye. Of there's a couple good wide receivers already in Cincinnati. It's interesting that you think a guy's going to walk in and basically say, "Go sit over there," or by midseason, go sit over there.
Joe Bryant had the best tweet of the week when he's like, "Yeah, it's all great about Jamar Chase and everything, but T. Higgins is the best wide receiver on the roster." And I was like, "Whoa!" I was like, "Okay." And I added a little GIF to it with a guy jumping off the top rope, and
he's legit. I mean,
yeah, he is.
Please, like T. Higgins was one of the hot names last year because he was earning it. He was producing as a rookie with a rookie quarterback, and then producing some with not the 101 rookie quarterback. Be careful saying that guy's now a chump because they drafted someone in the top 5.
Right.
We see top. Can I not remind you about Corey Davis? Like things are looking good for him this year. Took a long time to get here.
Yeah.
He was considered a massive bust.
Right.
Massive. And he was a high-level pick with a strong profile entering the NFL draft. Jamar Chase does too. It's been a while since he's played football repetitively in a competitive environment, and this is the most competitive he's had. Someone actually said it's been so long. Like his last game was it the championship game or something?
Yeah.
He was all the way. He was playing with Burrow, wasn't he? I mean, that was in college. So that was his last competitive game.
Yeah,
and so
Justin
he's working through drops.
Then, right? Yeah.
He's working through drops. He might have a legal issue as well. I mean, again, just the patience level when you draft, especially rookie wide receivers. Especially, you got to know that going in. I'm going to be tolerant. I'm going to be patient with that roster spot and with my expectations. Not everything is an Odell Beckham situation or Brandon Ayuk or, even T. Higgins, guys like that where they come in and, for a large part, they look the part right away. Just be careful about, what I always say is, why do you make the rookie pick if you're going to be impatient and you're going to last until September? Just don't even make it.
Right.
Trade the pick. Trade the pick.
Let the clock expire. I think what is your aim with this? To avoid the pain. We'll just let it expire. Listen, he wasn't up there for me, and this has nothing to do with what happened this week. It has totally to do with we've lived this life, right? We've done the whole, is a can't miss wide receiver prospect. Like, nope, there's no such thing. Corey Davis is holding on line 1 for us, and a lot of other guys as well, like that. We've talked about that before in other shows about the miss rate there. All that said, like the fact that he dropped 3 balls in a preseason game moves me zero amount, right? It didn't change my heart rate at all. So it causes me absolutely no concern. Now, I will say that there's a continued drumbeat, to use a SIG word, of bad news out of Cincinnati with him. Like that's given me a little bit of pause, but him as a top 10 wide receiver coming in was it was a mistake, right? It's a top 10 dynasty wide receiver when you haven't played a game is just lighting money on fire in the middle of the street. Like it's just a horrendous process, and we continue to do it to ourselves and expect a different result. Fortunately, I don't think a lot of us did that. So
yep, you got to get the production, you got to get the success track working, and you get a lot more confidence. One example from last year is Brandon Ayuk, right? I mean, you post a season like he did, you come in right away, mid-season, frankly, didn't get those reps of the preseason and early season to kind of get his feet under him. But if you start producing and you log it year 1, that gives a lot more confidence towards the trajectory you're on, the likelihood that you get all the way home as a big-time producer for at least one season and maybe multiple. But if you're just coming in complete blind and unknown as a draft profile, that is when the risk, as you said, to anoint and go too highly, especially when you're on a competitive depth chart. Let's not pretend like we know where this is going. And that's where the conversation started, is the depth chart is competitive. T. Higgins, as Joe Bryant said, may just be or is the best wide receiver there. And would I remind folks that Tyler Boyd is not
He's
a
no chump
either. Exactly.
Right.
Now, he may not be on the team 2 years from now, but the point is he's there now. And we still have questions on, is Joe Burrow going to be a lid lifter? Is he going to provide 2 top 24 wide receivers or 3 in the top 36 or 40? tall order, even for lacking tight end and, maybe some other limitations there. Maybe they're not a very good team and they pass the ball quite a bit, but that's still a tough task and does not happen every single season of producing that level spread around at wide receiver. We almost saw it. I think we would have seen it with Dak Prescott last year, because we probably would have had Gallup, Lamb, and Cooper in that range. But
700 attempts. Right?
That was a team going for what was it, 5,500, 6,000 yards? I mean, they were. Who knows where that plane leads?
Yeah, I was salivating sitting here watching it with my Dak Prescott MVP pick. Just
exactly
just drooling.
Chad Parsons, Jordan McNamara, episode 67, Football Guys Dynasty Show. And want to remind you about the mobile app for Football Guys. It's back for 2021. Beautiful design, and it's got everything you need: custom projections, dominating your waiver wire, trading with your synced roster, everything you need. It's available at the Apple and Google Play stores. We got a few Dynasty trades this week, and one of them involves Jonathan Taylor and a recently upgraded James Robinson. So it's a 1-quarterback league. We got Taylor for Aaron Jones back in Green Bay, James Robinson, and a 2022 first. So you're getting 2 starters projected for this year. You got to bank the first. And you mentioned a little bit of concern about what's the upside, at least for right now, with Jonathan Taylor.
And we know what the upside on Aaron Jones is. Like, if he's healthy,
he's got 2 seasons at or above what Taylor did last year. He's got 2 mid running back 1 years.
Right.
You're getting Robinson, you're getting the first. I mean, is this Aaron Jones? You got to be back in, right? Going back, this one season with Aaron Rodgers could be strong enough that validates this whole thing.
Yeah. And like, he has in his range of outcomes a better season this year than Taylor ever posts. Now, it's not to say that Taylor in future years can't do it.
Age difference and all these other variables, but you're also getting Robinson. Totally. I mean, if you can start like 4 running backs and you've got a couple guys that you like, but you're shifting Taylor to Jones and Robinson,
and again, a first.
If Robinson turns back into a pumpkin next year and Jones is 27 next year, but projected to still be in Green Bay, be a starter. But now you get the first coming into play. I love Taylor as much as anyone outside of Wisconsin, probably, and all about it. About that package on how much liquidity it gives you. You have 3 outs. I mean, this is Jones is worth at least a first. Robinson's worth a first. You get a first. I don't know, and 2 startable running backs at that. Yeah, a lot of outs. All right,
can I change the name in there for 1 second? Just change Taylor's name to Barkley. Do you answer the same way?
Well, I think Barkley's range of outcomes includes a ceiling that is, I mean, McCaffrey can touch it, and he's been there and done that and done all that stuff. But very few. Kamara, McCaffrey, Barkley. I mean, that's Dalvin Cook. Maybe that's the list of like who can actually post 28 points per game, 30 points per game. Those are possible for those guys. Henry, I don't think he gets there. A bunch of these other guys, get off my lawn. It's not saying those are the only guys that in a season can finish as running back 1. There's a lot of moving pieces to actually doing that. But the magical year, the 3 warp year, that type of stuff, just so that one is a little tougher for me. Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
All right, Superflex. We've got Marquez Callaway. I find Superflex funny because there's a late pick involved. Like that matters. Marquez Callaway, Ramondre Stevenson. It's a preseason only trade, by the way, and a 22 fourth for Tyler Lockett.
Wow. See, this is how you should play Dynasty, right? Like you sell. I'd take Lockett here.
Okay, I figured you would. I wanted to highlight this. This is actually a cold calling offer that came to me. As Callaway scores the second touchdown last night. This was sent to me. I got Stevenson cheap. I got Callaway super cheap, and Lockett on a team that's a really strong contender. Yes, please, and thank you. But this is just highlighting that. I mean, we might get to the season and Stevenson's barely getting any run at all if he is, and Callaway again the variable. Lockett this year probably posts a better season than Callaway ever will. This 1 year. Beyond that, who knows? It's all gravy. Stevenson, I mean, yeah, he's looked pretty good skill set wise. What does that mean? Well, he's behind a day 2 guy, and he's behind a round 1 guy for now. And how does next year look? I don't know. We'll see. Harris, checks watch, still under rookie contract. I don't know. There's plenty of variables to say Stevenson is never the predictable go away. Oh my gosh, look at his dynasty value starter in New England. He could be a nice player. There's plenty of backs around the NFL that have never been like for a month straight an NFL starter. It doesn't mean they're not good.
Right.
So be careful. But yeah, this is the total preseason versus actual profile and production.
Right.
All right. Corey Davis. I was actually going to ask a few minutes ago, well, we got the trade here. I mean, 1 to 10, is he like a 9.5 on the Richter scale of excitement towards Corey Davis and what he could do this year?
Very excited.
I'm interested. I'm listening. I'm listening to, what was it, a 75% target share or something? And
he had 9 yards per route run, and I was like, yes.
I know, per route run. Like, that's not possible. He's just getting a target when he's out there. I think the only time they go somewhere else is when Davis is on the sideline.
Right.
But Zach Wilson, if he upgrades this offense, Jets are downtrodden, and nobody really believes in the running backs. No one believes in the wide receivers except for Elijah Moore, who's not the wide receiver 1, interestingly enough. But we got Corey Davis. I want to see if I can get you off of Corey Davis here. The answer is probably no, but I'll see. We got Corey Davis and Tony Pollard for Chase Claypool.
Wow. That's interesting. Well, I think Corey Davis has the chance to be the wide receiver 1 for his team
this year.
In the in the coming years, and I'm not sure Claypool has that quite same chance. You could argue that Davis's situation is better with his quarterback play as well. From a market perspective, I feel like this is Claypool. Right. I'd be interested to know like how deep who are you gonna have to cut to roster Pollard? Like, I'd be interested in that sort of stuff too.
Yeah, we don't have depth roster, right? And so Pollard, the proxy here is a second, right? That's sort of high end injury away running back with no standalone value. It's kind of a second.
Yeah.
So it's it's Davis in a second for Claypool. And the other thing is, if Davis outscores Claypool this year, I mean, that doesn't necessarily make it a resounding win for that side. Claypool feels, as long as if he posts a similar season to last year, he's going to be decently insulated. Now, if Big Ben retires and they've got some uncertainty at quarterback and maybe a later pick, things aren't looking great. Maybe that changes. Deontay Johnson's not really going away anytime soon. Juju could. But like you said, I mean, it's not going to clear up to the point of like Claypool, stud quarterback, and he's the go-ahead alpha number 1 wide receiver. No questions.
Right.
We're not really headed in that direction. And Davis is already kind of there, and it's just kind of the level. Is he going to stay healthy? And the level of quarterback play are the major questions.
Yeah, and I'll say this too about Davis. Like, I don't think that there's much doubt he's good. Right, like you look at some of the ancillary stuff, like he's good. He's a good wide receiver.
Well, you're talking to the guy that charted, like, I just wanted to get the answer. Like one of those seasons, I think it might have been last year, where I basically the whole half season I charted his routes, and I was like, what's going on here? Like, he was open a lot, and that's not the end game there, but like he had a number of times where they would just look a different direction. It seemed like he should be the primary guy, and the check down happened, the opposite side or whatever, or it would just a misfire ball, it gets tipped away, but it's because it's on the wrong shoulder, or something like that. So there's a number of factors. You do that 3 or 4 times a game. That's the difference of being wide receiver 50 and wide receiver 20.
Right.
Like that's the difference between a really good game and one where you're like, 4 for 40. What are we doing here on 8 targets? Well, the 3 of the targets should have been right on him, and you're good to go. So he's gonna be an excellent litmus test. All right, last one. 1 quarterback league. So what is the value of a quarterback? Jalen Hurts and 110 for Russell Wilson. I don't want to lead the witness, but I wonder if you're going to pull the card. I think you're going to pull on this trade on the strategy point.
Do you have to give both of those things for Wilson? Like that would be the aspect that I would say. Like,
well, my poll was going to be, do you win this trade easily if if the one thing occurs, which is Hurts outscores Wilson this year.
Does that side win?
Yeah, like because now you have 110 in the bag and one quarterback, it's fungible, right? I mean, outside of a select few quarterbacks, and Wilson really isn't in that group right now. And who knows if he gets back there? Maybe he does, but yeah, if Hurts finishes higher than Wilson, you banked 110. And I would also tell people that 110, you could trade that maybe a slightly more for Keenan Allen. You could trade it straight up for Tyler Lockett. You could trade it for Robert Woods. You have plenty of outs to get a regular starter, even if you don't want to sit there and draft Bateman or whatever wide receiver du jour or Trevor Lawrence or whatever you want to do with that pick. You have a lot of options.
Yeah, I think that's a good lens to look at it through. I mean, I there's a very real possibility that Wilson has an elite season and Hurts isn't very good. And even if that happens,
you're fine.
I'm not sure that the first is making, I don't like, is it worth that what you paid, So I think there's other ways to get an elite. Like if you're concerned about Hurts, like pivot to Brady, like trade Hurts for Brady plus and right. Kick the can on making a decision at the position. That would sort of be my angle to it.
Yeah, that's a good one. And I typically like to go, like, I don't like to do this quarterback plus for a quarterback in a start one, especially. I mean, I guess I'm open to it in Superflex, but I'm the arbitrage downward. Give me the picks, give me additional stuff because I'm finding profiles that just happen to be depressed in the offseason. And so going the other way, and Hurts, I've mentioned before, in a 1 year prism this year, I like him. I mean, I guess if the Eagles are a good team and they feel Hurts is holding them back, they do have Flacco, one of the best backups in the NFL when you look at his profile, that could maybe turn the season for them. I don't know if that really happens.
He's going to turn it very short, Chad. It's going to be we're going to be looking at like an ADOT of like 2.2. It's going to be it's going to be something to behold.
Oh, okay. Well, I just could they make that pivot? Yes. But I think they pretty much give him the whole year. And Hurts running around, whether he's NFL successful is a separate conversation. I think fantasy wise, him not finishing in the top 15 or 16 would be surprising to me with how much rushing he provides, and he did provide last year.
Yeah.
All right. Good news, bad news. Bad news, we only have 2 quotes from the Footballguys Dynasty Forum this week. Good news is they are straight red hot fire.
Okay.
That this may take up 10 minutes. So 2 is plenty.
Hey, before we do that, I have a question for you. Let me just, before we jump into that, and I don't want to forget this. What's the chance that Mac Jones and Zach Wilson are the 2 best quarterbacks from this class?
Higher than most people think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead to your quotes from the Shark Bowl.
Mac Jones is so fun to watch. And I'm so glad that he was QB5 because I have high confidence that he can play. I have high confidence that he's not going to bust. Whatever bust means, that doesn't mean he's going to ever be a top 10 fantasy option. I mean, that comes down to more things than can you play.
Right.
But man, it looks like he can run an offense. This just in.
Yeah. Hey, why would you pay a first round startup pick for Joe Burrow when you can wait 8 rounds and take Mac Jones? It makes zero sense.
So wait, so does that mean it's Mac Jones and 3 firsts for Joe Burrow? How much does it cost to trade up from round 8 to round 1 in a super flex startup? A lot. How many future draft years are available?
Yeah.
However far it goes, give me all those first.
We doing NBA rules? We doing NFL rules on this?
Like, are these protected picks? That'd be fun. Conditional dynasty trades, but you know what I haven't seen? Protected picks. I'm trading you this second, but if it's top 3 in the round, it goes back to me. Can't have it.
It's reverting.
Not yours. Yeah, exactly. It reverts back. I'm so horrible. I made such a graphic error in this trading and valuation of this pick. I can't possibly give it away. Yeah, you don't want it to be on an orphan team, do you? All right. In this hobby, we have no better insight into the future than recent past performance.
Oh, I don't think that's true at all. I mean, base rates are really helpful, right? Density rates are really helpful. Using prior examples that are specific towards a player's profile. And so we talk a lot about profiles. We talk a lot about, what pedigree means in terms of the position and how long someone's been in the NFL. Those things really matter. Not what you just did in week 2 of the preseason, right? That's bad process, using a more, understanding a player's profile and sort of the range of outcomes and their and the arc of what their career generally looks like, and the ranges of those outcomes for different positions and pedigrees, I think is a huge deal. So that's that stuff. I mean, and I tend to discount this as we go along. And once we get players on the board with hits, right, I don't care as much about Terry McLaurin's college profile now that I did coming in. Like, he can play football, right? Like I don't care what he did at Ohio State at this point, because I know he can play, right? Like, we sort of have the answer to that question. We've seen that with other guys, right? We had questions about, about some of the stuff about how Deontay Johnson was going to perform. Like, we kind of know the answer to that one now. Like, Diggs was a bad, a low pedigree coming in, had a really good profile. We didn't know what that meant. Like, we know now, you know what I mean? So I think the profile, what you look for, changes, but that's not just what they did recently, right? That's, and I think the easiest trap you can fall into, and Dynasty loves to do this. I mean, 50% of a player's cost in any given year is explained by what they did last year in terms of total points. How flawed that is incredible. But there's so much that goes into it. I mean, all the stuff that we did in terms of, I did a ton of regression work this year in terms of articles on the site. And you just look at all the mistakes that people are making. And that's just what people did recently, right? And it's no further than looking at just the top line of what the stats were and the mistakes that people are making. It's like, hey, this receiver, Adam Thielen, has like a 14% touchdown rate. That's never going to happen again, right? Like, there's no chance of that. And he's being overvalued as a result of it, so you have to be really careful about what you're looking at. The production helps. What they've done recently can help, but you have to keep in mind sort of the bigger context of what the player is and what that actually means. And don't just look at the baseline number. You got to dive a little bit deeper.
Yeah, I like what you said, and just to double down on the point of basically, the NFL draft profile matters, and then you get the year one, so you're combining, and whatever that cocktail is for you, you don't have to break it down into percentages or anything, but now you have draft plus year one, and then you go draft one and then two maybe, but now you're operating pretty much off of the NFL, and then beyond that, I mean, so you can keep weaning yourself off of that college stuff pre-NFL, and there's exceptions, but I'll tell you, I mean, if a guy's productive, like if we look back in 5 years and James Robinson, it's like, oh well, he put up a couple of top 18 seasons, and I mean, the undrafted part starts to not matter at all. Right. I mean, obviously you might have that look over your shoulder factor, but it's if you can play, you can play. And you get a little more rope, obviously, if you're a first round guy, running back, wide receiver. We've seen it with quarterback. I mean, Josh Rosen, case in point, dude still has jobs. Not saying he's ever going to do anything, but the point is you get more chances. Dwayne Haskins, more chances to come, even if it doesn't work out with Pittsburgh, that you will get extra opportunities. It pretty much is round one. You don't get a lot of round three tight ends that are getting many extra chances. So you have to be selective on where that threshold is. But yeah, that garners you extra time, but it's not a ton. You still have to prove yourself. And then on the other end, like you said, Stephon Diggs and others, eventually, it fades away. He was a day 3 guy. No way. Like, he's just part of a relic of a story when you get to that point. All right. This last one is a pretty big subject as well. And I can't believe when I read it. So I didn't think this really existed. A trade got vetoed because it was deemed unfair. No collusion. So the quote here is, I'm not big into vetoes, especially in Dynasty, but this one deserved it. It was reversed by the league, and the trade was, and it'll be interesting to see how this ages 1, 2, 3 years from now. It was Trey Sermon for Tyreek Hill. And that trade was reversed. It was deemed, imbalance to the league if you let that go through. There was no collusion. So what are your thoughts on veto power, league votes? All these types of mechanisms exist in Dynasty. I wouldn't say they're commonplace, but man, what do you think about reversing trades? And I just don't find collusion very much, which means you're not reversing trades.
Give me the Hill side. On
that
deal.
wasn't part of the trading session, but
All right.
I'm assuming that's what most people would say, and that's why the trade was reversed in that specific league. But
just get my position clear here.
This is different than like peanut gallery. Like it's relatively common for leagues to make comments about deals, like oh wow, didn't know that player's available, or ooh, like that one, like so and so got screwed on that one, or whatever. But that is literally just like throwing peanuts from the balcony. Like that doesn't mean the trade's getting reversed. No one's calling for a vote or any kind of stuff like that. So are you in any leagues that veto?
I haven't had one. I don't think so. I mean, maybe there's mechanisms
you
for
wouldn't
it,
know because it's never
I wouldn't
happened.
know. Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah. Buyer beware, right? Like, caveat emptor, right? Like, don't like if you want to go out and make a stupid decision, I am not here to stop you. Like I don't like.
If anything, you'll be like, "Why wasn't I the benefactor of said stupid decision?"
Right? Yeah. How come? Yeah. How come you didn't come to me? But like, I don't like. I think I generally think that, and I think this is a big problem with some of the stuff that the dynasty community and the football advice community gets into is they act very paternalistic and sort of treat people like they can't make their own decisions, and I hate that. I think what we do is provide a service to people, and that we provide you some guidelines to follow. Here's some thoughts on how to do it strategically, but we don't need to force feed you. Like if you listen to our show every week and you read what we write and you follow our shows, like we don't need to tell you every move to make. Like you can go do it, and that's kind of how I've always viewed this. And I view dynasty veto trades in the same way. Like I'm in the league. Like I'm here to beat you. And listen, if you're going to tank your team, well, that's one less person I got to beat, right? But I'm not here to stop it, right? I'm not here to babysit you. So that I don't know. I think it's pretty. For me, it's not for me. And honestly, if I get a trade vetoed, like I'm probably voting with my feet, And okay, you can find yourself someone else to take the roster if I get a trade that I'm involved with vetoed, because this nonsense. Like I'm an adult individual with free will. Like I can do what I like. I'm playing this because I want to do what I want to do, not because I need to make a trade that fits everyone else's, portrait of what a dynasty trade should be. I think that's bogus.
The next 4 months is also the roaming Lord of the Flies zone of player value, that some are going to think of it almost like redraft and maybe exactly like redraft. It's lineup season. Others are going to have a longer term lens, and many people are going to be in between. But it's all going to be about just past data. I mean, by the time you get a sense of a 72-hour window of, oh, this player is worth X universally. Like, yeah, we have no June data points where it's just like, oh, yeah, you're free to draft a startup draft, and oh, ADP is going to be sticky-ish, and, here's what people think about players and trades. And no. It's going to be very specific to your league, your team environment, what you're thinking about with your lineups, team direction. And frankly, I've mentioned it before. If you got a hot potato guy you're trying to sell and you got a window of 3 or 4 days, you could have all the aspirations in the world of getting pick X or this level of asset in return, but you send out those offers and you get crickets and declines and no counters. Now what do you do? What's next? What do you do? It's like there's a bomb on the bus. What are you going to do? Well, the bomb on the bus is Sunday kickoff, and you might think that player is going to turn into a pumpkin. So you better recalibrate and move your way down. And if you truly want him off your roster, you have to know what your line is of, I will hold him if I will not take a third. I will not take him for a third. But you know what? You may get down to Sunday at noon and say, I got a counter. I've left it out there for this morning and I got nothing better. And now it's the roster spot versus this pick valuation. That's when you get that's you getting paid to be a dynasty owner. Those are the moments that you're on your own. No one's going to tell you the market is this. No, because you're in the league, you tried, and this is what it is. Take it or leave it. It's like a yard sale, right? Do I want to pack up this giant entertainment center and bring it back to the house like a tail between my legs? I thought I was going to get $100. Well, you know what? Check's watch. It's $350 at the 4 o'clock close. I don't even that's why they almost give stuff away. I'll give you $20 for all this stuff. You don't even have to move it. Sold. I thought I was going to get hundreds of dollars. Well, you know what? I'm bringing it home. I'm a failure. I didn't sell it. I gotta, slough it all over the place. And that's dynasty trading in season. It's the next 4 months. Welcome. So we're going to, talk about trading every single week, but it doesn't mean it's applicable in your league. It's thought provoking. It's something to ponder on the buy and sell angles, but man, it varies wildly league to league based on team directions.
Yeah.
All right. If you're into shows like this, you're a serious fantasy player. Consistency winning takes, it's challenging. It takes a lot of time. And I'll tell you, I can speak from experience. I'm in about 40 dynasty leagues, a few redraft leagues, and that Football Guys premium subscription gives you the edge, makes winning decision. But the biggest part is it saves you time. If you normally, the machinations of the waiver wire, setting your lineup, getting decisions on what players to consider. We've said before, Joe Bryant said it. He's the guide. We're the guide. We're not the end all be all, put the heavy iron fist down and saying you must do this. But Sigmund Bloom comes out Monday, Tuesday with, hey, here's some recommendations for the waiver wire, general bidding values. Well, you get in there and it might be different for your league. So we give you all that advice, but the big thing is you're going to get the edge and you're going to save time. If you can save an hour a week, you can spend that on your family, you can spend it on other activities, and you can also put it back into your dynasty teams if you so choose. But again, everything's going to lock down in season, and to get that league winning information, you got to sign up. We've got DFS options, we've got the big bundle, but we've also got the season long package, which includes my Football Guys. And again, you're going to sync all of your information of your leagues, get it in there, and it's set it and forget it. Just check in every single week. It syncs all your rosters, everything you need to have your best season yet. You go over to footballguys.com/join. In this episode,
and don't forget too, you get the subscriber contest, so you can get in the subscriber contest win. You can play.
How many rosters have you already done?
Week 3, like is
who wants the pressure? Who wants that smoke, Jordan? If you ever make it deep into November, the contest be in trouble.
I think I've been in that thing well before I was a staffer, and I think maybe I made it to week 10 like once. I'm terrible at constructing. I'm gonna spend some time like this week. We're gonna work on it.
What's always fun when this debuts, I always go in there and set something like I know what I'm doing. It's amazing. I went in yesterday and how many things changed.
Yes.
So always make sure like the day before it locks, you want all the information you possibly can to get the best values. You don't want to leave anything on the board. Don't miss on James Robinson because you set your thing 2 weeks ago and now you don't go back in there and refresh it. But yeah, good pull there. Subscriber contest, ton of great prizes, and staffers can't win. So you're going against Jordan, you're going against me and a bunch of others on staff. But you know what? We're not eligible for prizes. We're doing it for complete
bragging rights, baby. Bragging rights.
Exactly, bragging rights. But yeah, that's a good one. That alone, again, you could win enough to buy Football Guys for the next 10, 20 years easily. In this episode, we discuss. Oh, and one more time, that's footballguys.com/join. And in this episode, we discussed up at the top Travis Etienne. We also got the changing landscape with Marquez Callaway. Talked about the Saints plenty. Love our trade talk, including some of those players. Corey Davis, forefront in our thoughts, and always, I think this is 2 or 3 weeks in a row we've talked about the value, the value of quarterbacks in one quarterback formats. Also, Jonathan Taylor, mixing him in, and Jordan pressing me a little bit about Saquon Barkley. I am Chad Parsons. He is Jordan McNamara, and until next time, good luck in your dynasty leagues.